Just a few seconds, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we're live.
Okay, sounds like we're back together again here to discuss Senate File 32. We're in an open committee now, so we can we have a little more latitude to what we can do. I can tell you that when we took it back to the Senate, the issue was still that low, you know, dropping it to 35. They want to see nothing, basically. And so we need to figure out how we can, you know, come to some agreement. Now, there was some talk about if that dropped to a lower limit, if it wasn't permanent, then perhaps that's where we should go. Make a lower limit, maybe even I mean, you would never go to 0, but you know, you could go to 10 or 15 miles an hour if it was on a temporary basis because of, you know, some damage to the road or some, you know, maybe there's some weather activity that would preclude you from going. But I know that the folks that are, you know, driving large vehicles and trucks and everything, they don't want to be forced to go very, very slow on a road that would sustain better speeds, hence a speed study, right? So I don't know what your thinking is. Maybe we go that temporary route. If they want it permanent, then they'd have to have a speed study, or you know, what do you think?
Well, there, in the statute, it says it gives an out for safety issues in lowering the speed limit while under certain circumstances. It's already in statute, that ability.
Yeah, I haven't.
I should have brought the green book with me, but if we could look that up. There's already a caveat in there for safety.
Other than that, are there other issues?
No.
Well, there's another way of looking at this, and I thought maybe for discussion, after looking at how this was drafted, and the main issue that came up originally was the inability for YDOT to deal with the speed limit being set by not using a speed study. So in the current statute, and on line, well, page 2, line 9, it says the rules promulgated, rules promulgated by the department shall adopt standards consistent with national practices. I guess I wanted to throw this out here. Take a shall and make it a may. And then it'll give the YDOT the flexibility to have deference for county roads in this case, because we're only talking about unimproved roads within the county, not a paved road. And it would give them latitude to make that choice. I was hoping that YDOT would be here to, you know, Keith would be here, the engineer, to speak of that, and he's not. So, and that would allow us to renumber. Basically, the department shall not promulgate rules. We could remove that and then reference F below that section. But being it's a free committee, I thought I'd at least bring that out as a possibility. And I don't know if we want to go down that road or not.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I did also follow up as well, and I don't purport to put words in their mouths, but that's essentially what they told me, was that they would not feel comfortable with a may instead of a shall. And so that's I would understand as an engineer having that issue as well. And so I think that's a non-starter. Making that change there. I would like to understand what you were looking at in statute and how that would apply to this particular, where you would apply it in the bill as it came over to you to make it temporary. And I guess just like to understand that a little bit more, see if there's a path we can go down there.
Well, I wasn't on the temporary, that's the chairman.
Well, that was actually Senator Rothfuss's thinking.
Okay, so, but it was in terms of some sort of an emergency situation, is that correct? I thought you mentioned, Senator Kolb, that you saw something in statute there that I must have
Yeah,
misunderstood.
I must have not made myself clear. but-
And it was not necessarily emergency, it could be for any other reason. And he said maybe we put it for, anywhere between 90 days or a year, make a
Well,
you have to define what temporary is.
we could go up to a year because the study from the university takes up to a year to do. We could just universally say that.
So how, I guess, what does that look like if we look at that language, are we talking in subsection G then?
It was where the authority was given for temporary
Yeah,
90
we
days.
changed,
So that would-
we changed that in F, right? We added that language.
Well, I'm still back on what we had sent over to you, since you,
I was just going off of what we agreed on first.
okay, maybe we should start there. I guess my understanding is that that's not a position that your side supports, so that puts us back at the original amendment that we sent
The only
over.
position, the only thing that they did support is going to 35. They wanted it lower.
Okay,
But I've not spoken to anyone outside of the three of us regarding a temporary a drop for a temporary speed versus a permanent speed.
We could go up to a year with
we-
a temporary drop because you're allowing the university to do a speed study, which takes up to a year, right? On the original language that we first were working on.
right, and that's where I'm getting a little confused here. Which route are we going? And so if we're talking about a year for a temporary speed study, then, so you're looking at our previous agreement that we came to as a committee and defining that temporary that we have in here as 12 months? I'm a
That's
little
one thing to
confused.
discuss. Either that, or we talk about just lowering it to a lower number than what we were at, 35 or
Mm-hmm.
30. We go to a lower number and try and see if we can get any agreement on that, like drop it to, I don't know what, 20?
We've got the representatives from the county commissioners here. Would you like to enter in on this conversation at all? Give us your thoughts about, what we did in the past joint committee meeting and your knowledge about why the Senate didn't approve it. I don't know if you've discussed with anyone, Mr. Russell, but.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, members, my name is Jonathan Russell with the Wahoma County Commissioners Association. So going back to the earlier, our last discussion, it's my understanding that some on the Senate side were wanting total control. That's my understanding. Now, when we're talking about the speed limit or the study, we're fine with lowering the number as whatever you see fit. The length of a speed study is an issue and has been from the beginning. So, I mean, we're willing to discuss that further. I don't know which one we would prefer over the other between those two.
I understand it's the engineers that are having heartburn here, right?
Correct.
I wish, I have not spoken with him. You have, I take it?
Yeah, so I'm still trying to get clear here, of what you are proposing on this language. So are we starting with the original bill as it came over to us?
We can do anything.
And then, but I'm trying to,
Yeah.
I'm trying to clarify what you're trying to propose here on
We're
the,
starting from the original bill that came from the Senate.
okay,
Let's see
because
if we
that's the issue, as I understand it, that's the issue of as the commissioner WCCA has said, that's kind of the issue with a few of your counterparts, that they really just want the total control, and that's what the original.
Majority of our counterparts right now, that's the problem. Oh,
Right.
that's, we tried to sell it, it didn't work. So here we are again.
Understood. So then we're trying to look at, is there a way that we can take what we put together previously, which started with your original, the Senate's original bill, and made some adjustments, and now what you're asking for is perhaps either dropping the lower limit entirely or doing this on a temporary basis,
Well, it's probably a combination of both.
or both.
Both.
So if we go back to the original, the first committee agreement that we had, and you're looking at establish, let's see, delete establish and insert a temporary decrease
Yeah, we
of not
removed-
more than 55 miles an
We
hour.
removed establish, and we put decrease in there.
Correct, you're right, yes.
So, but
Permanently, yes, permanently, so if we temporarily decrease,
well, I think what you'd have to do is you'd have to, if you're gonna, you probably don't need the word permanently if
Correct.
you then further go on and say, you know, you decrease it to pick a number, speed, but then allow a temporary decrease to anything. Right? So that it's not permanent. But if it's permanent, then there's gotta be a floor.
correct, yeah. So now I'm tracking with you. I appreciate, I'm a slow engineer, so.
Me too.
That being said, so if we go with language that says temporarily decrease, not more than 55 miles an hour, looking at the original here, eliminate the 35.
Well, no, you have to keep a floor in there if you're gonna do a permanent decrease, right?
Right, let's start with the temporary for right now. So for right now, if we look at just the temporary, we can eliminate the floor, right? That way it gives the possibility of responding to conditions. And then we look at a permanent, and that's where I think we might have a little more of a sticking point, because the original idea of having the permanent in how we originally did subsection G, or excuse me, subsection F, we went to 45, and that was based again on data. And so there was comfort level to say, we've already got the data that really kind of supports this. Permanently decrease to 45, you can do temporary, if we establish an agreement here, temporary with no floor, but have a specified time window.
Right. I think that's what we're talking, right? That's my understanding, so.
So, but 45 isn't the ceiling, it's a standard, right?
So
No, 55 is the maximum.
55 right now is what's in statute. We could leave that alone, and we could say that on a permanent basis, the commissioners could lower without doing a speed study to 45. And then,
Well,
No,
I believe
And then
that's where we started, at 45.
Yeah, that's not gonna
Now,
work.
that.
but then also
And we-
allow the temporary for up to a year, which
Depending on the study.
Yeah, this,
pending a study.
So we dropped it to 35 in our committee, because the 45 was not palatable. We dropped it to 35, but that made it temporary or permanent. But now, if we add an additional temporary, we won't put a floor on that one.
yeah, there's another, like we get done talking with this, I'd like to talk about it another way. What the issue would be is, let's go where we were at before. The question at hand is, is there any willingness to go below 35 miles an hour to bring that down lower? I think that's our best path
On a-
forward. If we start going back to the old ways, we're not gonna get anything out of that. And after further review of the statutes, it appears pretty clear that there's no mechanism for enforcement from the state to the counties when it comes to the county deciding to do whatever they wanna do with the speed limit, okay? If you don't have a road, I mean, that's really what it looks like. So I wonder if we could just take it and go, you know, let's just go, let's see if we can agree to go lower and try to sell that. I mean, it's just, I don't know why. I mean, it is the way it is. So if we try to go lower, the question is, would you be willing to do that? We try to take it back. I think that's a better path forward than trying to reinvent the wheel right now. And that's just a topic for discussion. I mean, is there any appetite to go lower than the 35, come back with another positioning, keep what we had before, and say we'll go lower?
No, there's not an appetite for that at this point.
Okay.
And to challenge you a little bit on the mechanism, if there's no mechanism for for YDOT to enforce, then why are we even having the discussion?
Well, I think they wanted to, I can tell you why. I'll use you, obviously you weren't there during the interim, but the original problem came back as YDOT wanted the authority to be able to do this and work with the counties. And this was a mechanism to do that. So obviously it's a little convoluted, but that was the reason. That's why I said the shall to a may. Because they wanted the authority to do it, clear authority granted by statute to do it. That was how it came to be this. That was the beginning of the whole conversation. So the question was, how do we do it, right? And so that ended up with this language that we had originally in front of us. So they wanted the ability to do it. That's what they wanted. They wanted us to give them statutory authority to do it. And that's what this does. That was as I remember it, that's how it started. If that helps anybody know how this thing got rolling.
The issue with the shall versus may has to do with adopting standards consistent with national practices, and that's where part of the rub is there with that particular language, is that there are established practices that YDOT has to follow in order to get federal funding. And some of that is also passed through to the counties. And so by getting rid of standards, we run the risk of not being able to get some of those federal funds as well.
Yeah,
and it's an established national practice.
Yeah, I'm not saying you get rid of anything, okay? It says you may, which gives them the absolute latitude to do either. I'm trying to figure out a middle point to give them what they want on both sides of it. Lets them have the authority to follow national standards. We certainly want to do that under most circumstances, except for these dirt roads that are out in the middle of nowhere. So this would give them the flexibility. That was the question I had. That's why I posed it that way. That was my intent, to try to see if that would work. Now, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But that was the beginning of this whole conversation about why we're talking about speed in counties on unimproved roads or non-paved roads.
Understood. And I appreciate the thought to reach some other ground here. I wouldn't necessarily say that's middle ground, but I do appreciate the effort there. So I guess if what you're telling me is that setting some sort of a permanent number, 45 was our preferred originally. We gave in the compromise to 35. But then now we're saying that we could actually even free it up a little bit more, have a temporary no floor, which I think is a good ground as well. And it allows some flexibility to commissioners to be able to lower those limits as needed. It's been identified that there's a time issue with, depending on the route that they take, getting the speed study. That's one of the big concerns, and I get that, I understand that. So if we allow time to be able to do that, to get the speed study, then I think we're getting somewhere. But
If you go to the 35 and then we do that,
Well, yeah, we went to the 35,
we're staying at 30.
and we couldn't sell that, but I'm thinking that if we throw in a temporary with a time limit,
That would go
then we
lower,
can sell the 35.
and then we could sell the 35.
Yeah,
That was the thought, I think,
with the temporary.
With the temporary was to add, to basically do something a little more temporarily to give them flexibility.
So temporary with a time frame. What kind of time frame are we looking at?
Well, I'd say the way you worded it, up to a year. I mean, that's really what it means, right? If you're gonna have, live at the University of Wyoming, have a study, and it's for up to a year, well, then that's what they're gonna, that's obviously sounds like the route I'd take if I was trying to not deal with it for a year. You know, initiate, it does take time from the university too, you know, they're busy.
Well, half the year they can't probably do this. Depending on weather conditions.
Depending on weather, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the reason why it should be, I guess, a year.
Well, then they temporarily lower it, and then, if we set it at 12 months, that, you know, and they don't get this study, well, it expires and they have to raise it again, right?
And then just do it again.
Or reinitiate their study, that's correct. You just be under perpetual study.
I don't think you.
And that's why we ended up including
that.
that language, you know. I don't even know what iteration we're on with this, but we had language at one point for,
Well, it doesn't have to be a year, it could be 8 months, 9 months, I mean, it could be a little less.
Well, I think depending on the time of year you're talking about, you may be a year. I mean, if you had it, you know, going into the winter months.
Any thoughts, gentlemen?
They're smirking.
Do you have any smart thoughts?
Any advice for us?
Well, just to throw something out, going back to paragraph F,
which version?
we'll go to the original bill.
Okay.
Paragraph F, if you put a lower speed limit in there, whatever that number is, and insert with justification and only after consultation with the local authorities, the engineer, road bridge superintendents, and law enforcement agencies with jurisdiction over the roadway. So they're consulting with those entities about justification for them wanting to lower that speed limit.
If they don't have to do anything they consult about. In other words, they can consult, but that doesn't have any ramifications on the outcome. Doesn't necessarily.
And that's exactly right.
Well, in the original language, it did say without conducting a speed study or providing justification.
It's in the bill title. That's
Yeah.
another problem we're dealing with. It's in the
And
bill
so,
title.
I mean, there was 2 ways to do this, right? You do it without conducting a speed study or providing justification. I don't know what that justification would be.
The opinion of the Board of County Commissioners. That's what it is.
Yeah, right.
That's the justification, but that's their job. That's what they got elected to do.
And that's why engineers are involved in the design and setting of speeds and all that sort of stuff too. It's their job.
Right.
Yeah, well, unfortunately not elected. So there's.
But
the
hired.
rub. Oh, well, so what? They, you know, I mean, I get it. And if they're smart, they'll consult like they do with their attorney, right? And then they do what they think is in the best judgment of the county. The bureaucrats don't run the county. And I think any response, you know, my commissioners always consult with their engineer. It isn't like they're running wild. They always talk to our road engineer. And generally, they do exactly what he says. I mean, really, that's the reality of this. And this all came about from a county that wanted flexibility next to a subdivision. That's how this thing was first thought to be needed. Without conducting, it was a smaller county, they didn't have engineers, you know, they don't have much money. And it was a way of temporarily, or I shouldn't say temporarily, but dealing with a subdivision that popped up next to a county road. That's how it started.
So I like the language of including the local authorities, engineer, road and bridge superintendent, and law enforcement. But I really want to apply that to all of this, especially if we're going to go with 35.
We already had agreement with 35.
Yeah, but it wasn't accepted.
I
And so,
know, but I'm trying to.
at this point, we're trying to come up with something that will
go
be
below-
satisfactory all the way around.
To
And
go
I,
below 35, I think is the.
below 35 is not going to happen
The only way-
from our
The
position,
only way is if we do it.
other than temporary.
Well, that's what I'm
Other than
talking about. I'd say a temporary below 35
I think
situation,
that's where we
keeping
need
the
to
other
go.
language.
I think that's where we need to go.
In consultation with,
Yeah, committee, if I can, so as I watched or heard the concurrence in the Senate, the major opposition was that commissioners should have absolute flexibility regardless, 0 to 55. And so what we're trying to find a pathway here, very respectful of the Road and Bridge folks, had great relationship with them. Some, as I've talked to in the Senate, want to say, you know, you shouldn't have to consider their words. I'm not here to say that. And so what I do hear from the Senate is that the number needs to come below 35. And that's where we're trying to say, we're you know, sure, we would love to have that authority, but we're also willing to balance that with the notion that you have to consult with some folks before you do that, and the notion that you have to have justification for doing that. Now, as I read this portion of statute, if you want to change the speed limit permanently, that's in B. That's already there. It requires you to go through a speed study and all the parameters, and you can go 0 to 55 there. So what we're looking for really is that other phase where we don't have to go through a speed study, and what is our flexibility going to be? And so, again, I'm hearing from the Senate, you got to go below 35. I'm hearing from you guys that you want to see some parameters around that, and that's where I think if we can draw in the justification, draw in the folks that are out there on a daily basis, maybe you want to throw in that it needs to be posted. I think that's probably an appropriate thing. I like that from your version. We certainly want to get this across the finish line with you. We're willing to work the Senate a bit to try and get some concurrence here, but if we can find some middle ground here, that'd be great.
So my suggestion is that, Stephen, you and Rob, sit down with them tomorrow morning and just come up with a temporary language for that numbers. Because I think we're actually pretty damn close.
I agree that I think our thinking is right. I think we just gotta get the right words, as you said. I'm amenable to, you know, having consultation with whomever we decide to do. I think that's, I mean, they're gonna probably do it anyhow. It's gonna be a rational way to go. Does the commission, if they don't agree, do they still, you know, what does in consultation mean?
These are what you just said.
So
it leaves it wide open.
Well, we put those words in there, we gotta understand what they really mean, right?
Absolutely.
So that's why I think we really need a little bit more parameters, and that's why I thought, you know, keep a floor for you know, if we do anything permanently, we've got to have a floor, right? Without a speed study. But if you want to go lower, then give it to them temporarily, like, or go get a speed study, one of the two. I think we can probably come up with that language. So, how about you and I get together, we'll draft something, send it to the committee.
Yep.
If everybody agrees, then we'll write it up and we'll present it to the Senate.
It doesn't have to be everybody, just 2 and 2.
Well, I have to present it to the whole Senate, so,
True.
yeah.
No, let's do that.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, does that sound good?
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks for your input, you guys, and we'll continue this
Hope we entertain.
tomorrow, so.
This has been a
Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting
This is
then.
always entertaining.
Thank you.